Kevin Ganosa Deer helps to perform the ceremony, songs, speeches, and dances of the Mohawk people. He lives in the Ganawage Mohawk territory situated on the south shore of Montreal and has been employed as a school teacher at the Garde Noha Mohawk Immersion School since 1989. In the older traditional teachings of the Longhouse, as a faith keeper, he is a resource person on Haudenosaunee worldview, philosophy, treaties, land claims, and Native European historical perspectives. He's been deeply involved in the Mohawk language and spiritual revitalization of his nation for the past 36 years. During the 1990 Oka crisis, he was involved in peace negotiations to try to bring the dispute to a successful resolution between the Iroquois Confederacy and the federal and provincial governments. As a motivational speaker, he tries to instill into the younger generation the hope that they can succeed in whatever their goals are in life, provided that they remain spiritually grounded and maintain the concept of the good mind. Kevin enjoys discussing life and is always open to learning new ways of knowing. Kevin's presentation will be titled Giving a Spiritual Inoculation. In the presentation, Kevin will assert we're at a crucial time in our history where Indigenous wisdom of this land is rising up and prophecies are being fulfilled. The prophecies say a time would come where we would help our brothers and sisters that come into our house to wipe away their tears so that they can see different, open their ears so they can hear different, to remove that lump in their throat so that they can speak, and together we will put our best collective thinking forward for the benefit of those future generations coming.
Nagade uamuni zarade Cenetu savadahum sadado ague watkun waradi Honda senhorat cadaswo wagre dokara niwanaga da gatka we neganu wara dunsara Yatsanunya jise yagwada garide skana yagunu tunyu Nono da shat dora te godinu jera jituniut Nati no hodo dawana tunko yetini sta huza. Zinidzi jodaso zim zade zinyor uamuni zarade. Se yogot ko wahaje no hodo yogot sta chate wini zarage. Tan yatana jodokte agwego zino hodo ganga gero hunzage. Nona dasatu gauro anaga no hodo garuni. Agwego nane se gutinidzi agwe rudio daje. Tinagane ka jukko gwego aska da wawa nuni nugo ligura. Tano datsida no warado ne sa uyera ka sastan sara gowa. Sia gwego segu ga edewes ua wuni zarade. Tano nek kari wanota ne jotku ada da wada no warado tano ganunya garana ne adawatste. Ajatku giwai wagere dokare niwana ga dagat kawene ganuara dunsara ekadunayotne nigura. So I started out welcoming each and every one in some of the ancient treaty protocols of how we greet one another. As I'm looking around, we're all seemingly in good mind, good health, good spirit. And when we weigh that out and we ask ourselves, well, why is that? So we refer to Earth Mother, Turtle Island. So from the beginning of time, all of these things are gifts. And all that is required of us is that from time to time we acknowledge all of these things. And for us, the people of the Longhouse, it gets expressed through sacred song, ceremony, song, dances, speeches, and rituals. That we acknowledge all of these gifts here in this lower world. When we look up to the things that are hanging in the sky, to the four winds, the big winds, the smaller winds, our grandfather, the thunder beings, our elder brother, sun, grandmother, moon, the star knowledge, the star stories, the star people. Then we go beyond that. We talk about Izinat Gorunya, the other side of the blue. And what happened there was, well, first of all, Rarunda, the great sky chief, falls in love with Yetzit Zizu. There's ceremony, there's celebration, there's a feast, there's conception. And then she has to leave that world to come to this lower world to bring the seeds of life so that in this lower world there will be the perpetual rejuvenation of life forever. So when we look at our Genesis, our story begins with love. We come here, we're supposed to be love. Love all of these things. And when everything is all said and done, we return to love. Now that's in this foreign language. But if I go in my own language, the word that we have for this we call Ganaru Watsara, Ganoru. Ganoru, the closest translation would be something that is precious. So we're supposed to understand that all of this is precious. And when something is precious, how do you treat it? You treat it with the utmost respect. So in our language, we call ourselves Ungwe Unwe. Ungwe, a person. Unwe comes from the root word Zinawa, which means forever. So now when you translate that, the closest you could express it would say, I am a spiritual being having a human experience. And because we originate from spirit, which is the great spirit, and we come here for a time, we're all going back home. I want you to understand that concept. We're already guaranteed everlasting life. There's no such thing as fear, because in our worldview, there's none of that. As I said, we come from love and we return to love. But you all know the purpose of fear. Anything that says you should be fearful, all it is a form of mind control. Because when everything is said and done, we're supposed to be fearless. Never fear death, never fear dying, never fear COVID, never fear cancer. Because whatever is going to happen, this is walking clay. In my language, if I ask you, what's your clan? Onizataroda. Dara is clay. It has nothing to do with bear, turtle, or wolf. That only comes later. So we ask ourselves, what clay are you? And why do we say that? Because it talks about when the Creator Daruhiawagu made our first ancestors and those dolls, when they opened their eyes, they didn't have no language, they didn't know none of this. Then it says we were given language, we were given original instructions, and we're told, go now and observe, and the animals will be your teachers. So I'll just concentrate on the three principal ones that are in my nation. So the bear. Watch a mother bear when she has 2 cubs. If she sees you or she senses you, she's going after you. Because in her mind, she feels that you're a threat and she's going to do anything to love, to protect her cubs. So that's how we're supposed to be protecting our kids. Ensure that nothing will come in to harm them, even if it's perceived. The next thing, so let's look at the wolf. So the wolf, one wolf by itself sees a moose. But that one wolf can't bring down the moose. But when they work together, they communicate, they cooperate. So now as a team, now they bring down the moose and they could have their supper. So it's all about communication and working together. The turtle. Now watch a turtle. Well, how is a turtle? Take time. Observe. Look at this beautiful life. Don't be in a hurry. And from time to time, close your eyes and go in and connect with the true essence of your being. Who am I? Where do I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going when I leave this place one day? And when you finally get it, you see that you truly are a spiritual being having a human experience. But not only you, each and every one. And when people fully understand this idea and this concept, all the wars end immediately, all the rapes end immediately, all the self-sabotage ends immediately, suicide, all this different kind of stuff, because you get it. But the unfortunate thing is, so many things have came into our world in the last 500 years that makes you not believe that. Now you start to doubt. You look in the mirror, people are not happy what they see. So if you don't have self-love, then how can you love? Because it all starts with the self. I know, because I went through all this stuff of suicide ideation, not really loving myself. And then when you put on all of the stuff that we went through, being Christianized, residential schools, we will kill the Indian to save the man. All of this, we got to get rid of these people, because there was one agenda, and that was land. You know, we have to take all these land, these resources, and we have to impoverish these people. Even though we talk about relationship, about how things were supposed to be, like I call this the supreme law of the land. Some people say this began with Europeans. So I said, no, it began with us. Because when we were in warfare, and we loved to go to war, we even had a perverted thinking that we said even the sun celebrates that we go to war. Then when the Peacemaker came amongst our people, that would go into the 4 directions, and I would just like to spell it this way: N, north, east, west, and south, because it spells a word, and that word is news. So this was the good news, that the Peacemaker would come, because it shows there's 4 black beads in the heart area, because our people had black hearts. Killing. If you look at what's going on right now with the war with Russia, who suffers? The kids, the women, and the old people. Because the young ones think that, well, we're going to go to war. So all of that, what's going on there, we came from that, we understood. And when the Peacemaker came and said, all right, this is going to end now, first thing you get is resistance. Who are you to tell me? But there's a whole long story to that, but our people began to change. So coming with peace, friendship, and respect. And if this was the peacemaker and this was our ancestors, so they said, all right, we're going to agree to this. And when the Europeans got here, then we said the same thing to them too. Because our people began to see very early that there was something not right. Because a lot of things that they said, but then what they did didn't match up. In the oral tradition, when at first contact, we said, well, what do you want? Oh, they said, we want to share this land with you people. Because mind you, we were the power at the time. These were like little kids that were coming to our shore. And our people said, what else do we need to know about you? Well, they said, we're coming with God and His Son Jesus. We said, tell us that story. And they did. And when it got done, they said, okay, from what you're telling us, we believe that we're talking about that same source of life for all life. So we shouldn't have a problem. We're going to smoke the peace pipe. We're going to bring Daruyawagu and our ancestors into the equation. You're going to bring God and Jesus. So now we're going to travel this river of life together. But our ancestors were not educated. They couldn't read and write. They didn't know that the Pope had decreed papal bulls. That is the impetus for the doctrine of discovery that says when you get to the New World, those people are less than human. And because they're not equal to us, you can subjugate them. You can do whatever you want because we are coming with the right of God. Now we all have to look at the history and we all know what happened. I got to a point where Mohawks started to kill each other because of different ideologies and concepts, and it all had to do with monetary matters. So that May 1st, 1990, when those two guys got killed, I just coincidentally happened to come up here to go talk to one of our chiefs. And when I got there, his wife says, you got to talk to Jake, you've got to do something. Anyway, I spoke with Jake, and Jake said, well, I'll call an emergency meeting then and we'll get together. And the decision that was made at his house with a few people that gathered was we're going to go call for the return of the Peacemaker. Because when the Peacemaker completed our league, our government, our great law, Guyana de Goa, Kajokwan Huxtu, Kajokwa the people and how we're together, he said if we ever argued amongst ourselves, then go and do this ceremony. So we did that ceremony. And for me, as a little kid growing up, I knew nothing of my culture, my language, my ceremony. I remember in Ganawage, I'm standing on the front seat of the car, my mom's driving, and one of the guys had this, we used to call it the Indian village. The Greyhound buses from Montreal would come there. It was like a stockade. There was a longhouse. And they would practice songs and dance with feathers and leather. So we're riding by there one day, and I said to my mom, Mom, look at the Indians. Because in my mind, they were. My dad says, you're an Indian, be proud. What was that? It was a word. When you go to school, even though it was an Indian day school in the reserve, they never told us anything about how beautiful and all the contributions that our people did. It was all, well, you had to be saved. Then we had to go to these statues. We had to understand that we're born in sin, that we're sinners, that we need to be saved. So now you're going to do all of this penance. You tell the priest your sins, all of this different kinds of stuff. And I always struggle with that concept. How could I be flawed? Then you add into that all of the stuff that we go through on native reservations. The violence, the lateral violence, the alcoholism, all of that dysfunction. Then as a kid growing up, I got acne. I used to say, heck, I ain't good enough. I should maybe just get out of this place and get out of here. Anyway, and then you add that whole idea of you're flawed right from the get-go. And then there's spiritual warfare. God against the devil. It's all about conflict and war. Even when you die, for crying out loud. So I went through a whole bunch of confusion and not knowing and understanding. Finally, I asked some of the older guys, big-time iron workers that built Manhattan. I said, what happens to you when you die? They said, you're dead. I said, well, what about this idea about heaven and hell? Because that's all I knew at that time. So that's all BS. When you die, you're dead. There's nothing. I turned on the radio today. The song says, "'Cause you're here for a good time, not a long time. So have a good time. The sun ain't gonna shine every day." The camel says you want to be, the commercial says you want to be cool, walk a mile for a camel. You watch a football game, hey, you want a good life, Miller High Life. And then as a little kid growing up, weddings, you got to get drunk. Child is born, a christening, you got to get drunk. They're playing lacrosse game, you got to get drunk. Christmas from New Year's, you got to get drunk. So as a little kid growing up, I was confused about life. So I emulated what the adults did. All that stupid stuff, because I didn't know better. Even when I turned 18, my dad says, "Hey son, you want to be a man?" I said, "Just like you." So at the former school where I'm a principal, was a past principal, in the gymnasium, there was 200 men. I went through this initiation ritual, and when everything was all said and done, I was welcomed into the lodge. And it wasn't the Medewan Lodge, it wasn't the Sweat Lodge, it wasn't the Fasting Lodge, it wasn't the Longhouse Lodge. But you can come with me even today. We'll drive in my car, we'll go to Gunawaga, and I'll show you the lodge. It's 40 feet wide by 80 feet long, and it's the Gunawaga Moose Lodge. Now in the lodge, do we talk about our language? Do we talk about spirituality? Do we talk about any of these things that will enhance our growth? Nope. Just a place to go and maintain the status quo and dumb yourself down. So now my grandpa, my mother's father, we get grandpa in. My grandmother was upset. She said, "Why you put your grandpa in there?" "No, why? He's going to be drinking too all the time." And then the night he dies, my kid brother came knocking on the door. He said, "Hey, grandpa's coming to see you." Well, I had no time. I went around. Next day, my boss calls me up, says, "You coming to work?" I said, "Yeah." So why? He says, "Your grandpa's dead." And he was the anchor in my life as a role model at that time. So then I said to myself, well, and at that time I feared death. All the stuff that said I should be fear-based. The devil, hell, burning, sin. Then even in our own culture, oh, somebody's going to witch you. Somebody's using bad medicine, witchcraft. Don't ever go to the cemeteries because the dead people will come and haunt you. So all of this fear. Anyway, so finally, my grandpa comes to me in a dream. And he tells me all kinds of stuff. And I asked him, I said, "Grandpa," I said, "how do we communicate like this? You're supposed to be dead." I said, "There's no such thing as that. I'm going to tell you how it is." He says, "I'm with our ancestors going back to the beginning of time, and we're sitting in a giant sky world council. And in the center of that council, as big as a little drop of water, is the earth. And we're always doing intertwined spiritual intervention from spirit to earth, back and forth forever. Because," he said, "if we ever stop doing this work, then this earth dries up and there's no more life." But he says, "Come on, we're going to get these strawberries." And coincidentally, it's strawberry time right now. As a matter of fact, this Sunday we're having our strawberry festival. So yeah, talking about the strawberries, so we take the strawberries and we make a drink and we take one drop. So he says, "Come on, we're going to get these berries." Anyway, we go get the berries, and then as he gets them, I grab his arm and said, "Grandpa," I said, "tell me more about this place." "Ah, yeah, Wahado. They work studying Wahado to dir harder." No, he says, "I'm in a hurry." He says, "I got to get back. They're waiting for me." And I remember when I got up that following morning, I said, "Holy heck, I don't care what anybody says. Even if the Pope was sitting right here and says, "What, you think you know where you're going when you die?" Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. But anyway, so getting back to this idea of spirit and where we originate and where we're returning. So I had this big painting that was done of that. And it depicts my grandpa. Because in there, it shows the Sky World Council, because in another dream, he's telling me about our constitution and how everything is all based on that, even in the spirit world. So that's my grandpa, that's that circle wampum. These are all spirits, and in the center is the earth. I have this in a big painting. So this past May, 4 years ago, I come walking in, and I can't explain it. Something that seems like it jumped off that picture, or with just my own thought. But it said, we're going to give you a deeper understanding, a deeper revelation. So that little dot, instead of envision of the earth, envision it as a human egg. All these ancestors sitting in a circle, instead of looking at them as ancestors, imagine it as a human sperm. So the sperm connects with the egg. Hey, look around. There we are, a miracle of life. So what my grandpa says in spirit and how we get here, I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty profound. Because everybody's always wondered and questioning about some of these ways that we know. And to me, these things just gets reinforced. And I never knew the significance and the power of dreams, because I wasn't raised with that. When I first went to go ask a buddy, because my grandpa came to me and he needed to have his feast done. And mind you, he was buried all Christian way. We didn't know any better at that time. I'm talking 1978, 1979. So then I went to go see a guy who's involved with the Longhouse. He says, your grandpa needs a feast. I said, what's that? So someone has to burn tobacco in our language, call his spirit. They set the feast food out and we eat together. Come on, I said, spirit. Who the heck believes in that? I said, what? I said, there could be a God. Then if there's a God, there's hell and burning and sin and demons and possession and all of that. I said, you're just scaring me. I ain't going there. And he said, that's your choice. So eventually that led me then to start. And then it took me to the people of the Longhouse. My uncle was one of the leaders. So he started explaining me. So finally I came to the idea, yeah, we're going to do this. So my grandma was still alive. I went to see her. I said, Grandma, I said, I had this dream about Grandpa. She said, yeah, tell me the dream. So I told her the dream. She says, what does it mean? I says, well, I said, you're cooking in that dream. You got to prepare this feast food. So my grandma goes like this. So I'm going to tell you one thing. And they just had celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in May, and he dies June 22nd. So I was married to your grandpa for 50 years. And if your grandpa wants something, you know what? He's going to come and see me, not you. And this thing that you want, as long as I'm alive, it ain't happening. Because in her mind, all of this stuff, like what is a prevailing attitude, a lot of people don't say it. But in the back of their mind, this is the work of the devil. Anyway, we had that feast, and as I say, it was like almost there was a portal that was opened up between me and him because of all of the things that he tells me and teaches me about the ancestral realm. So my transition started with the death of my grandpa, June 22nd, 1978. December 12th, 1978, I'll never forget because I got hired as a researcher for the Confederation of Indians of Quebec under Andrew DeLille. And our land grievance in Ganawagi goes back to the year 1680. Now get this. When King Louis XIV of France, who never ever set foot here, decided he was going to give our people land. And the land was 2x4, right adjacent to La Prairie de Magdalene, which was for the Jesuits. And then they had these auspices to oversee everything about who we are from the womb to the tomb. But like everything else, all of that land gets eroded and there's only a little bit. So I was opening myself up to all of this history. Then my daughter wasn't planned, but she's conceived in February of '79 and will be born in November. So now I'm coming into fatherhood. And then now there was a teacher that came to Gunawaga, Tom Porter. And I'll never forget, because he was that teacher that also helped to inspire me. Because he said, before I begin, I want to give you the key to understanding the universe. And as a young, wet behind the ears, 22-year-old, I said, holy heck, if there's a key, you don't know how bad I want that key. And he started out with what I did, the Thanksgiving address, how we understand how we're part of all of this sacred energy. Now, I started out with the drum, and the reason why, because when you fully understand what this is about, there's water in here. Because from water comes life, all the woods, all the plants, the tree nation, the plant nation. Then finally comes all of the animals, because they got to eat. Those things got to be there first. And then everything is all held by a ring, and that's natural law. And when we come to this lower world, we're all given this sacred breath. So now, when we're singing our sacred songs, we're acknowledging all the water, all the rain, and all the life that comes from that, all the trees, all the animals, and you understand how this is all held together. So when we sing our sacred songs, we dance to all of this life. And I call it the sacred dance. And if you don't think you're not participating in this sacred dance, then just look at your chest. And your chest is expanding and contracting. If you could see your heart muscle is expanding and contracting. The snow came, the snow left, the snow's going to come, the snow's going to go. The ocean go up and down, up and down, up and down. Stand at any lake and watch the water. You see those little ripples always coming up against the shore. The sacred dance of life. So Sky Woman brings that sacred energy down to this lower world on a snapping turtle's back. So what does she do? She follows the water. Look at your own birth. The day that you were born, what happened? We all follow the water. If everything went according to plan, our mother's water breaks, the contractions start, and we're literally pushed through those muscles from that upper part of the womb through the birth canal. Look around, here we are. And in our creation story, when Sky Chief pushes his wife to come to this lower world, I used to think, man, he was not really a good man, husband, why he did that. But our story, as I said, is all based on nature. And if you look at how you got here, you were literally pushed too. So now it makes sense. He had to do that, because if it didn't happen like that, well, there wouldn't be no life for us here in this lower world. So all of this, and what it done for me, was to create within me this wealth, or this knowledge of spiritual wisdom and teachings and understanding that is so fulfilling, because all of that fear, all of that not knowing and understanding is all gone. Today I tell a whole different story. I learned my language, I learned our creation story, I learned our songs, our dances, our history. I'm open to dreams, and now I get it. And as I said, if everybody understood these teachings and these ways of knowing and understanding, all the wars end, all the rapes, all the murders, the racism, the self-sabotage, and we understand that we're here to exude love, to be love, to love all of this creation, to love ourselves, one another, the Mother Earth, our ancestors. Wow. For lack of a better word, heaven on earth. But too many people are walking with blinders. And if you look at the monetary system, what that did, introduction of money, now you got caste, ruling elites, emperors, kings, queens, and then the so-called poor people. Without money, whatever, if that was never introduced here, we would understand that we're all equal. There's no hierarchy. We all just come here to love one another, to share, to work, and to be mindful of those future generations coming, so that when they'll be born, they'll inherit a happy, safe, clean, beautiful, peaceful, loving home. And now with abrupt climate change and this climate emergency that we're in, because of this monetary system, we are all going to suffer in the very near future because of our short-sightedness of thinking that all of this, because in this English language, it denotes and it says you can classify these things into living and non-living. You know, those grandfathers sitting right there, they're alive. You know how much knowledge and wisdom that they've seen? But in this English language, it says, nah, you don't look at that. It's only a thing. So we call for the return of the Peacemaker. Now the indigenous spiritual intervention is taking place. And this spiritual knowledge of this turtle island is resurrecting up. And it's happening in many forms, in many ways, through many people that are now seeing through the power of the Great Spirit and our ancestors, and coming from this place of love and trying to share so that we can get all of the people that are coexisting with us in a treaty relationship, and even some of our own people, that we all, like it says in our condolence ceremony, we all better start to see different. We all better start to hear different. We all better start to speak different. And together, we better start doing different. Because we're at the precipice now. There are some scientists that say we're already past those tipping points. I like to say that even if we did, Mother Nature could still work and do certain things because of our connectedness, because of ceremonies, because of certain things that we do, where she can hear us. So we got to start, because if we don't, and it's safe to say that humans are not going to be around in a very near future. And we'll have no one to blame but ourselves. Because the whole earth, when you fully understand it, is the Garden of Eden. We have no right to destroy it. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to those future generations whose faces are going to come out of the earth. That hopefully that when they will be born, they, as I said, they will inherit a happy, safe, clean, beautiful, peaceful, loving home. And when you look at this young girl, this Greta Thunberg, she says, why should I go to school? So she boycotts every Friday. I ain't going to school. Because she says, why should I get this education to learn all this data, facts, figures, when the data, the facts and figures saying that if we maintain the status quo, I ain't going to have a future. Because there's going to be no more world. And you adults who are in control, your house is on fire, and you act like as if it doesn't matter. But it says it matters to me, because we're that generation that because of your short-sightedness, we're not going to have a future. So all of these things now are coalescing, and we have to start to really think about who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going when we leave this place? And for us, as it says, it comes down to Ganoru. It's precious. Ganoru Kwatsara. The preciousness of how we're supposed to understand what we say now in the English language is love. So everything is precious, and when anything is precious, you treat it with that utmost respect. So many things have happened. I know in 1990 I saw this video. It was produced by the Kogis. It was called The Elder Brother's Warning. And I remember I made a copy of it, and I said, I'm going to share it with Sarah Smith, because she kind of adopted me as her son when I started to get to know her. And so anytime you come to Six Nations, you got a house here and all that. And so we worked on many things, you know, because she was instrumental too. There was a series of workshops I remember that we did about awakening the spirit within, healing the spirit within, freeing the spirit within. And then at that time too, there was a lot of things that was going on, because this was just after 1990 with drum beat, and there's so many people, but there was a lot of great things that were happening. And then even we had a meeting at Polytech with different people and elders, and the idea was if we should call upon the horsepower now. So we did the Uipi ceremony, and the message that came from the ancestors that we have to call on the horsepower, and the horses have to come across this land to begin wiping the tears of the seventh generation and healing the Mother Earth. So when we talked, do we have the people, the resources, how would that happen? Anyways, it all came together. And the horses left Vernon, British Columbia, and other people and horses joined up, and some runners, and they arrived here in Six Nations Reserve on August 27 of 2004. Then there was a Youth and Elder Summit. The late Jake Swamp read off this proclamation, and then the youth took that to the United Nations. So all of this spirit worked, because once it got into the United Nations at the so-called heads of state, the first thing that happened was the Prime Minister of Canada, Harper, made that apology. And then you hear now about the United Nations and the rights of Indigenous people. Then there was many, many other things that started to happen. As I said, for me, a lot of people talk about 1990, the Oka crisis, as being the watershed that shook up this turtle island and created this resurgence about everybody going back and pick up their language, their ceremonies, and what have you. But I say that on May 6th, Sunday morning, May 9th, when we called for the May 6th, 1990, when we called for the return of the Peacemaker, that again, there was a spiritual intervention that happened. And all of these things are all part and parcel of all this beautiful work that this lodge does, that Diane does, all different ones that are getting people to try to understand what is the indigenous spiritual knowledge and wisdom of this land. I remember all of these things were happening. Tom Porter takes people back into the Mohawk Valley. Miracle, the white buffalo was born. That's associated with Lakota. And then even in our longhouse, what Skanya Dario was, the four messengers said about all of these things that would happen. So all of these things are here, and it's all coming together. Then I remember Sarah Smith called me up and says, "Kevin, you got to get up here right away." She says, "You're not going to believe this." She says, "There's crop circles in Clint King's farmland." Come on, I said, Sarah. I said, "I don't think that's true." I said, "Somebody must have took a rope," I said, "and a wood and knocked it down." Well, she said, "We're going to go up. We're going to go and see it from the air. We're going to get in this little Cessna if you want to join us." No. I says, "You can go up." Anyway, when everything was all done and the people came here and all of that and pictures were taken from it, my good buddy, Kenny King, this is on a buffalo jaw. He made this and he gave it to me. And essentially, I looked at it this way. This is spirit. This is the upper world. Here's a broom. Here's a line. Here's the earth. Here's the sign of peace, but there's not total peace in the world because you just gotta look what's going around. And what does that broom represent? Broom means we gotta get rid of the old paradigms because they're not working. If everything that was said was the way, then how come there's no peace in the world today? How come there's still war? How come there's environmental degradation? Because we have to open up our eyes and say there's something missing. So here's that intervention hitting the earth. So when we call for return of the Peacemaker, and just prior to that, the Kogis came up here. Because when Sarah was in Central America, she met the Kogis and they said, "We got to come talk to your people," because we used to sit in council and we used to council telepathically. But something happened. And you know what happened? Our ability to think and understand got superseded by another power. You know what that power is? Right here, electricity. Because the minute you buy into that, you disconnect yourself from the earth. The Kogis, they still live, and their mamos go into a cave from birth to 7 to 9 years old, and then they have that sacred emergence, and that becomes their spiritual leaders. So they talked about this sacred council. Then here's us now, the people. Our mind and our path, are we in alignment with how we're supposed to act and be? And that was on July 22nd, 1999. So as I said, all of these things are all coalescing, bringing us together now to try to help us with understanding about these times that we are in. And I tell an interesting story, because when my mom got married and I was conceived in August, I was only supposed to be born in August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, but I was born in March. So I said, you know what? I says, I couldn't stay in the oven 2 months longer. I had a message to get out, and I had to get this message out. So I was born premature. And the minute I was able to leave the hospital, because my mom said, "You're lucky you're alive." She says, "What, your lungs weren't completely formed. You had no nails, no hair, no eyebrows." She said you couldn't even like suckle your whatever, because you just anyway. So when I was able to get released from the hospital, I came back to Ganawage and been there ever since. But I was born in Connecticut. And if you know anything about Connecticut, even on the license plates on Connecticut, there's a little motto at the bottom. And it says, "The Constitution State." And I've been saying, ever since I got involved in this, I'm resurrecting our Constitution and bringing it to the whole world to understand the concepts about sitting under the great tree of peace. In 1754, Benjamin Franklin, well, actually it goes to 1744 at the Treaty of Lancaster, he witnessed a condolence ceremony for the first time. A Mohawk and an Oneida were condoling some of the nations that were out in the West that were having war with the French. He seen that condolence ceremony and he was in awe. In 1754, at his so-called Albany Plan of the Union, he asked the delegation of our people to go to Albany. And there was a great orator at the time, his name was Hendricks, and he explained all of our understandings and teachings of our government. And those colonists, they were amazed, because they were saying, "What, you people, you have a government, but you're not under like a king and being oppressed?" And the women, they were even so fascinated too, because we clan mothers will put those chiefs in positions, and if the men doesn't act right, we take him out. Wow, women could have that kind of a power? Not where we come from. Anyway, all of these ideas of true freedom and what a participatory democracy is, where everybody has a say, the women, the old people, even youth. Anyway, so that started all of these ideas about how now we're going to go to war with our father, the king. Because these Indians, even though they have all this knowledge and all of that, they're only in the way. We have a plan how we're going to remove them, and we're going to take all these lands, these resources and all of that. We'll put them on reserves, or we'll get rid of them. And then when the time comes, we still have reserves for future. And that is where we are now. So now that everything has been usurped and almost destroyed, now they're coming back to the reserves. And that's one of our prophecies too, the gold and silver snakes. And it says our women are going to get together. And when our women get together, they're going to have that hair, that power of that clan. And then our men, we're going to be like that hickory, strong but flexible. And that's going to create the bow. Then we're going to take our leadership and we're going to send it to pierce the minds of those ways. And hopefully we'll be able to keep things at bay. And this is where we are. If you look at what's happening now, the Governor General, the woman of Department of Interior, my daughter, AFN, our women are starting to come in these positions of power. And even though they're European constructs that says that we have dominion and control over you, but sometimes you need to put people in those areas to try to begin to change the minds. Because we're not going to do it at war. We're not going to do it with any type of manipulation, power, or control. The only way we're going to do it is we're going to say, this is who we are. We are Ungwehunwe. Spiritual beings having a human experience, and our life is forever. You are in treaty relationship with us, whether you like it or not. Because you brought God and Jesus, we brought our ancestors, and this is a sacred covenant and agreement that we are in this land. If people don't like it, they can always go back home. But in this land, this is how it's supposed to be. And it's like this, but now we're doing all of this stuff to hopefully bring it back. Because your children too, your grandchildren, are going to suffer just as much as us if we don't take the time to try to understand what happened. And like it says in the Ojibwe prophecy of lighting the eighth and final fire, remove those masks of lies, deception, and deceit. Come from the place of the heart. Let's talk about what happened and let's fix it so that it doesn't happen again. Now, you look at a year ago, 215 kids, spirits have resurrected up from the dead. Now they said it's up to 5,000 or 6,000. Why are these kids, these ancestors' spirit, resurrecting up from the dead? And here's what I say, because this monetary curse and spell that came with the religion, that came with fear, that came with money, that came with now this hierarchy that says might is right and we're going to subject you, these ancestors are resurrecting up from the dead. And as they're resurrecting up from the dead, they're lifting that curse and that spell, and now all people are coming to the realization every child matters. It's orange. Why is it orange? When you look at that fire, it's orange. Tinua yudeka, watagon, ne duana dunkwane ojire. Where that wood is being consumed, that's ojire. The flame is odunkwa. In our Mohawk language, when we talk about akwajire, sahwajire, agowajire, we're talking about ojire. We're talking about that where that sacred fire is burning. And that's our word for family. Ojire, gahwajire. So we're talking about that sacred fire that burns within each and every one of us, not just Mohawks or the Confederacy, but all people. Even in our language, it talks about that. When you take the time to take those words apart and try to understand it. So why is all of this thing happening? Because we're at this precipice now where business as usual is over. We better start seriously asking ourselves, who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? We better start listening to the indigenous spiritual wisdom of this Turtle Island, because the scientists say, with regard to this climate emergency that we're in, that we need a new paradigm, and that the indigenous people of this entire world, if we listen to their wisdom, there is hope for the future. But everything now rests in our hands. Do we have the intellect? Do we have the love? Do we have the openness to ask ourselves, yeah, I can start to see different, hear different, speak different, and do different? Or I'm going to say, I don't care about nothing. To me, money is my God. I got to work. That gives me power. It gives me the ability to subjugate and do what I want to do. But as I said, look at where that's taken us. So I appreciate the time coming here today to talk a little bit about the things that I've experienced. I can go on for a whole week, but I had to condense it real short to 1 hour. But nevertheless, this is where we are, this lodge. So what is the lodge? So really, even the lodge, it's all just a representation of us going in. because this is the sacred house. So yeah, all of this, and then even the longhouse. Why is our longhouse built like this? The entrance to it, the wall, and then it's elongated. Well, because it talks about the sky world dome. We look at that sun, our older brother, comes out of the sun, reaches a midway point, starts to set, goes back into the earth. I look in the mirror, heck, I'm starting to set. The hair is turning white, face is starting to crease up, crack up. But that's good, because in a not too distant future, I'm going back into the womb of my mother. But my true essence, my odzire, kahwadzire, comes from kanoru, kanarunkwatsura, that it's precious. Izinat garunyadi, the other side of the sky. And I'm going back home. Tomorrow that sun resurrects up. It shows about the idea that even though we go in the earth, we're coming up, we're resurrecting up, not in flesh, but in spirit. So when you understand that idea about how you are a spirit and everybody else is a spirit, that's the great spirit in all of us. So when you understand that, you can't go and say, wow, I'm going to do this to another person, because you see the Creator in them too. So, do we see the Creator in all of this stuff? Because here it is. Anagi, got na som ni yojats. Nagadi jinikari wis waktare. Noho da ni nya tegu wakada wis ta haje. Ayamoski was ayat the genha. Ne jinizi ga zanu tunyu zaha wa ga satsta ne. Tanu zaha was at ni guna hyanta ne. Noho da ne gadu nana unda waru. Kuguhu e ni I. Ne zi yotsununya. Owa when is a rio. Awai gujin noho da Yogwatsta chat de Winizarage, Ywezo, Yuskats. None of the Satu Gauru and got no hold the Garunioni, Saguna ne, Kniat. The Nunek Kariwanata chat de Winizarage. Taya de Wadanu Radu. Ajutko Giway, Zenigane, Saoyera Gassastasara Goa, Yamakoa, E. Zeniji, or Gadadi Noa. Tanayas Chatku, Skanas Wanutuni, Chatku as a Wada Karitage, Hamba Hibaya, Hamba Hasha, Yo Yanere, Yo Yanere. To.